All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, and jump back in where we left off last time. Welcome back. This is our second night of reading from the classic holiday fairy tale story, whatever you want to call it, Nutcracker and Mouse King. Last night we got started and saw the introduction of the Nutcracker, the children of the house, and the very charming Christmas they had, or Christmas Eve, I suppose, and the adventures of presumably imagination that little Marie had on Christmas night. So, tonight, we'll see the continuation of the Godfather's very imaginative story, as he's explaining the history and background of the Nutcracker, and how he came to be so ugly, but still such a gallant gentleman. Alright, let's dive back in. We don't have a whole lot to go through tonight. Exactly. Might be imagination, might be Christmas magic. You never know. When an ugly old clockmaker is involved, it could be either way. I guess a rather dour godfather of a clockmaker, uncle, whatever his relation ends up being, not too far off from a Christmas elf, is it really? Alright, so let's jump back in where we left off. Oh, hello again, Stream Elements. It's been a little while. Thank you for stopping by. Alright, we will resume now from well, I guess there aren't numbers on these chapters, but Uncle and Nephew. We don't have a whole lot to get through tonight. I imagine we'll probably be finishing this around our normal break time, so we might have a little bit of extra time for reactions and little outbursts off to the side. Alright. Nutcracker and Mouse King, beginning from Uncle and Nephew. If any one of my highly esteemed readers or listeners has ever accidentally cut himself on broken glass, he will personally know how painful it is, and how awful it is altogether, since it heals so slowly. Marie had to spend nearly a whole week in bed because she felt so dizzy whenever she stood up. But finally she was hale and hearty again, as ever, springing all about the room. The inside of the glass cabinet looked very appealing, since trees and blossoms and houses and lovely glowing dolls stood there, new and shiny. Above all, Marie found her dear Nutcracker, who, erect on the second shelf, smiled at her with sound little teeth. When she gazed at her favorite to her heart's content, she suddenly felt very agitated. She saw everything Godfather Drosselmeyer had told them, especially the story of Nutcracker and his quarrel with Frau Mauserink and her son. Now, Marie realized that her Nutcracker could be none other than young Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg, the likable nephew who, alas, was hexed by Frau Mauserink. As the tale was being told, Marie didn't doubt for even an instant that the skillful clockmaker at the court of Pirlipat's father could have been anyone else but Godfather Drosselmeyer himself. But why didn't Uncle help you? Why didn't he help you? That was Marie's lament, and it raged livelier and livelier inside her. While the battle she was watching focused on Nutcracker's crown and kingdom. Weren't then all the other dolls his subjects? And wasn't it then certain that the astronomer's prophecy had come true, and that young Drosselmeyer had become king of the kingdom of dolls? In properly weighing all these matters, wise Marie also believed that Nutcracker and his vassals had actually started living the moment she entrusted them with life and motion. But that wasn't the case. The figures in the cabinet remained stationary and motionless. And Marie, far from giving up her inner conviction, put the blame on the still effective spell cast by Frau Mauserink and her seven-headed son. "Well, dear Herr Drosselmeyer," Marie spoke aloud to the Nutcracker, "you may not be able to move or speak, but I'm well aware that you understand me, and that you fully know my good intentions with you. Count on my aid if you need it. At least, I'm going to ask my uncle to lend a helping hand when his skill calls for it." Nutcracker remained still and quiet, but Marie felt as if a gentle sigh were breathing through the glass cabinet, whereby the panes resounded, barely audible, but wondrously charming, and a faint chime-like voice appeared to be singing, "Little Marie, my guardian angel be, yours I will be, my Marie." The girl felt a strange comfort in the icy shudders that flashed through her body. Twilight had arrived. The medical officer and Godfather Drosselmeyer came into the room, and it wasn't long before Louise had set the tea table, and the family sat around, talking about all kinds of cheerful things. Marie had very quietly brought in her little armchair and settled at Drosselmeyer's feet. Now, when everybody held their tongue, Marie peered into Drosselmeyer's face with her big blue eyes and said, "I know now, dear Godfather, that my Nutcracker is really your nephew, young Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg. He has become prince, or rather king. All this has come true, as was predicted by his companion, the astronomer. But you also know that he is on a war footing with the ugly Mouse King, the son of Frau Mauserink. Why don't you help him?" Marie then retold the entire account of the battle as she had witnessed it. She was often interrupted by the noisy laughter of Louise and the mother. Only Fritz and Drosselmeyer remained earnest. Have you ever sat down with a niece or nephew and had them tell you an entire elaborate story, backstory, history, world building and lore out of nowhere? You wonder where they've come up with all this? Not even 5 years old, and the creative imagination just goes absolutely wild. And I have to tell you, to every single detail, every blade of grass described. Very interesting. A little tiring, but very interesting. "Just where does the girl get all her nonsense from?" said the medical officer. "Goodness! Why, she's got a lively imagination," the mother replied. "These are just dreams, created by her ardent fever." "None of this is true," said Fritz. "My red hussars aren't such cowards. Goodness gracious me, darn it all, how else would I come down?" With a bizarre smile, Godfather Drosselmeyer took Marie on his lap and spoke more gently than ever. "My dear Marie, you've been given more than any of us. Like Perlipat, you are a native-born princess, for you rule a bright and lovely kingdom. But you'll have to suffer a lot if you want to take charge of poor, deformed Nutcracker, since Mouse King persecutes him anywhere and everywhere. However, I'm not the one who can save him. Only you can rescue him. Be strong and loyal." Neither Marie nor anybody else knew what Drosselmeyer meant. Instead, the medical officer found those words so strange that he checked Drosselmeyer's pulse. "Most worthy friend, you have a serious case of cerebral congestion. Let me write you a prescription." But the mother thoughtfully shook her head and murmured, "I can catch Godfather Drosselmeyer's drift, but I can't articulate it clearly." So it's a little bit of a segue and slice of life moment as we're in between bits of the stories and the telling from the others, and Marie is explaining why, or asking why wouldn't you help him, and Godfather is just, trying to be mysterious and aloof. But you know what? He's got an idea. And meanwhile, the doctor's like, I wonder if this guy's okay. All right. And now the next chapter. Victory. It wasn't long before Marie was awakened by a tapping in the moonlit night, a strange knocking that seemed to originate in a corner of the room. It sounded like small stones being hurled and rolled to and fro, with a quite repulsive squeaking and squealing in between. "Ah, the mice! The mice are returning!" Marie shouted in horror, and she tried to wake up her mother, but every sound stuck in her throat. Indeed, she couldn't stir at all when she saw Mouse King burrowing his way through a hole in the wall. With sparkling eyes and crowns, he then scurried about the room. Finally, with a tremendous jump, he landed on the nightstand right at Marie's bedside.
"You must give me your sugar peas, your marzipan, see? Otherwise I'll chew up your nutcracker. Your nutcracker, see?"
That was Mouse King, hideously munching and crunching with his teeth. And then he swiftly jumped back through the hole. Marie was so frightened by the gruesome spectacle that when she woke up the next morning, she was utterly pale, and so agitated that she was unable to utter a word. 100 times she wanted to tell her mother or Louise, or at least Fritz, what had happened to her. But then she thought, will anyone believe me? Won't they laugh their heads off in the bargain? But one thing was clear. In order to save Nutcracker, she would have to hand over her sugar peas and her marzipan. Such a sacrifice, really. That evening, she took as many of those supplies as she had, and she placed them on the ledge of the cabinet. The next morning, her mother said, "I don't know where the mice are coming from in our living room. Look at poor Marie. They've gobbled up all your sweets." And it was true. The greedy Mouse King didn't much care for filled marzipan, but he had gnawed on it with his sharp teeth, so that it had to be thrown away. Okay, so Mouse King knows what's up. He's just spiting the little girl at this point. He doesn't actually want the marzipan, he just wants to make sure that she doesn't get it. Fair. Marie shrugged off the loss of the sweets. She was so delighted that, as she believed, her Nutcracker was saved. Still, how did she feel the following night when the squeaking and the squealing were right on her ears? Ah, Mouse King was back. His eyes sparkled more dreadfully than on the previous night, and the whistling between his teeth was even more repulsive.
"You have to give me your sugar dolls and your tragacanth dolls, your little thing. Otherwise, you little thing, I'll chew up your nutcracker. Your nutcracker."
And the gruesome Mouse King sped away. The next morning, Marie was very sad as she went over to the cabinet and most dolefully gazed at her sugar and tragacanth dolls. But her pain was valid. For my attentive listener, Marie, you may not believe what loving figures shaped out of sugar and tragacanth belonged to little Marie Stolbaum. Next to her, a very handsome shepherd with a shepherdess was grazing an entire herd of milk-white lambs, accompanied by his bold little dog. There were also 2 postmen carrying mail, 4 very attractive couples, cleanly dressed youths with wonderfully clad girls swinging in Russian swings. Behind several dancers stood the Maid of Orleans, by whom Marie didn't set much store. But deep in the corner there stood a red-cheeked boy, Marie's favorite, and the tears poured out of her eyes. "Ah!" she cried, turning to Nutcracker. "Dear Drosselmeyer, what wouldn't I do to save you? But it's so very difficult." Meanwhile, Nutcracker looked so tearful that, as if seeing Mouse King's 7 jaws wide open and aiming at devouring the miserable youth, Marie decided to sacrifice everything. Hence, that evening she placed all the sweet dolls, just as she had placed the sweets, on the ridge of the glass cabinet. She kissed the shepherd, the shepherdess, and the lambs. Then she finally brought her favorite, the little red-cheeked child of the tragacanth, from the corner, and she slipped him all the way back. The Maid of Orleans had to be moved to the first row.
No, this is too awful, the mother exclaimed the next morning. Some huge nasty mouse must be wreaking havoc in the glass cabinet, for all of Marie's beautiful sugar dolls have been gnawed on and nibbled on.
Marie couldn't help weeping, but soon she smiled again, for she thought to herself,
what does it matter? Nutcracker's been saved.
oh yes, appeasing a German villain never went wrong. It always solves the problem. Absolutely. I see what's going on. In the evening, the mother told Drosselmeyer about the mischief worked by a mouse in the children's cabinet.
It's appalling that we can't destroy the obnoxious mouse that's acting up in the glass cabinet, gobbling away poor Marie's sweet. Good goodness, Fritz broke in cheerfully. The baker downstairs. The fabulous grey cat. I'll bring him here. He'll soon put an end to the issue and bite off the mouse's head, whether it's Frau Mouserink herself or her son Mouse King. And, the mother went on with a laugh, the cat will jump around on chairs and tables and throw down cups and glasses and commit 1,000 other kinds of mayhem. Oh, not at all, Fritz retorted. The baker's cat is very deft. I wish I could climb to the tip of the roof as delicately as that cat. Just no tomcat at night, said Louise, who couldn't stand cats. I knew there was something wrong, something off about Louise. Big sister. Ha! Don't like cats. I don't like you. Actually, said the medical officer, Fritz is right. Meanwhile, we can set a trap. Don't we have one? Godfather Drosselmeyer can do the best job, said Fritz. After all, he invented the mousetrap. Everyone laughed. When the mother assured them that no trap was to be found in the house, Drosselmeyer announced that he owned several. He went home, and an hour later he returned with an excellent mousetrap. Now, the godfather's tale of the hard nut grew lively, even apparent for Fritz and Marie. When the cook was roasting the bacon, Marie shivered and shuddered. Fully imbued with the tale and its marvels, she said to well-known Dor, "Ah, my queen, just watch out for Frau Mouserink and her family." Fritz, however, had drawn his sword. "Yes, just let them come. I'll teach them a thing or two." But everybody, under and on the hearth, remained calm. Now, when Drosselmeyer tied the bacon to a fine thread and gently placed the trap next to the glass cabinet, Fritz exclaimed, "Be careful, clockmaker! Don't let Mouse King play any tricks on you!" Oh, how miserable Marie was the following night. Her arm was ice cold. She moved to and fro. Her cheeks were raw and wretched, and the squealing and squeaking filled her ears. The repugnant Mouse King sat on her shoulder, and he dribbled blood red out of the 7 gaping maws, and with munching and crunching teeth, he hissed into Marie's ear, hissed with terror and horror. "It's out! It's out! Don't enter the house! Don't join the feast! That went to the trap! It's out! It's out! Hand over all your picture books! Plus the dress! Plus no rest! Just for you to know! Poor Nutcracker will miss all night! He'll bite off sight!" Marie was filled with sadness and sorrow. The next morning, she looked quite pale and bewildered when her mother said, "The wicked mouse still hasn't been caught." Believing that Marie was mourning her sweets, and was also scared of the mouse, the mother added, "But just keep calm, dear child. We'll soon drive away the nasty mouse. If the traps don't work, then Fritz will bring his grey cat." No sooner was Marie alone in the living room than she went over to the glass cabinet and sobbed to Nutcracker. "Ah, my dear good Herr Drosselmeyer, what can I, a poor unhappy girl, do for you? I can also give away all my picture books, and even my lovely new dress that was given to me by Holy Christ. I can hand over that horrid Mouse King for him to chew me up." But no matter how much I give him, Mouse King will keep asking for more and more until I've got nothing left and he ultimately chews me up instead of you. Oh, poor child. Just what should I do? Just what should I do? So, Marie realizes something that, the League of Nations never quite caught on to. Yes, a little bit of a history lesson. Ha-ha! While grieving and bereaving, little Marie noticed that a large bloodstain was left over from that night, from Nutcracker. Ever since Marie learned that her Nutcracker was actually young Drosselmeyer's nephew, she stopped carrying him on her arm, stopped hugging and kissing the boy. Indeed, she barely touched him because of a certain timidity. But now, she removed him very cautiously from the shelf, and she started rubbing away the bloodstain with her handkerchief. Suddenly, however, she felt that Nutcracker was growing warm in her hand and beginning to stir. She swiftly returned him to the shelf. Her lips shook to and fro, and she arduously whispered to Nutcracker. Ah, most worthy Demoiselle Stahlbaum, excellent friend, how much I owe you. No, you won't sacrifice any picture book for me, any dress given you by Christ. Just get me a sword, and I'll take care of the rest. May he... Here, Nutcracker lost his power of speech. His eyes, inspired to express the inmost melancholy, became frozen and lifeless again. Marie experienced no horror. Rather, she hopped for joy, since she knew of a method for saving Nutcracker without further painful sacrifices. But where would they get a sword for the boy? Marie decided to ask Fritz for advice. So, in the evening, when their parents had gone out, the two children sat alone in the living room by the glass cabinet. And here, she told her brother everything that had happened to her with Nutcracker and with Mouse King, and why it was necessary to save Nutcracker. Fritz grew more pensive over nothing so much as, according to Marie's report, his hussars had conducted themselves so poorly in the battle. He again asked very earnestly if that was true, and when Marie assured him that it was indeed true, Fritz hurried over to the glass cabinet. There he gave a grandiloquent speech. Then, to punish their selfishness and cowardice, he cut off the ensigns from their caps one by one. Furthermore, he forbade them from blaring the Hussar March for a whole year. After pronouncing his sentence, Fritz turned back to Marie, saying, "As for a sword, I can help Nutcracker. Yesterday, I pensioned off an old colonel of the Cuirassiers. He won't be needing his sharp and lovely saber any longer." The colonel consumed the pension allotted to him by Fritz, who kept him in the backmost corner of the third shelf in the cabinet. He was drawn up from there, the decorated silver sword taken off and hung around Nutcracker. The following night, Marie was still so horrified that she couldn't fall asleep. Around midnight, it sounded as if a bizarre racket, a roaring and a jangling came from the living room. All at once, there was a squeal. "Mouse King! Mouse King!" cried Marie, and horrified, she jumped out of bed. Everyone remained still, but soon there was a soft tapping on the door, and a very fine voice was heard. "Most esteemed Demoiselle Stahlbaum, you don't have to worry about opening up. I've got good, cheerful news." Marie recognized the voice of young Drosselmeyer. She tossed her little coat on and flung open the door. Little Nutcracker was standing outside, with his bloody sword in his right hand and a wax candle in his left hand. Upon spotting Marie, he knelt down on one knee and said, "You, old lady, you alone have steeled me with chivalrous courage and have strengthened my arm in order to fight the boisterous man who has dared to scorn you. The treacherous Mouse King has been defeated, and he is now rolling in his own blood. Oh, lady, do not refuse to accept the signs of victory from the hand of your knight, who is devoted to you even unto death." With these words, little Nutcracker very skillfully tripped off the 7 golden crowns of Mouse King, which he had slipped over his left arm. He handed the 7 crowns to Marie, who joyfully received them. Nutcracker stood up and continued speaking. "Ah, my dearest Demoiselle Starbloom, having overpowered my enemy, I ask you, what could I do to show you splendid things? If you felt enough affection for me to just take a few steps. Oh, do it, my dearest Demoiselle." That is the end of this chapter, and of course it happens off screen, but the final battle between Nutcracker and the Mouse King it just sort of happened. The best action's always off screen. It's really a tragedy. All right. So, let's continue. Before we jump back in, I like how the brother is so very earnest with his play soldiers, between disciplining them for cowardice in the sight of the enemy, to pensioning off an old retired colonel to send him off to a happy retirement. Like, takes his toy soldiers very, very seriously. It's a good lad. All right. Next up, we have the Kingdom of Dolls. I believe that none of you children would have hesitated for even an instant to obey honest and kind-hearted Nutcracker, who could never have had anything nasty in mind. As for Marie, she was all the more obedient, since she knew how greatly she could rely on Nutcracker's gratitude. Indeed, she was convinced that he would keep his word and show her many splendid things. She therefore said, "I'll go with you, Herr Drosselmeyer, but it mustn't be far or last a long time. You see, I didn't get enough sleep last night." "That," replied Nutcracker, "is why I'm taking the nearest path, although it's somewhat difficult." He took the lead, followed by Marie, until he stopped by the huge old wardrobe in the hallway. Marie was astonished to see that the doors of this closet, normally shut, were now wide open, so that she clearly made out her father's traveling fox fur, which hung in front. Nutcracker very deftly climbed up the ridges and adornments so that he could get hold of the enormous tassel, which, fastened by a thick cord, hung on the back of that fur. When Nutcracker pulled hard on the tassel, a very delicate cedar stairway quickly dropped through the fur sleeve. "Please go up, dearest Demoiselle," cried Nutcracker. Marie did so, but scarcely had she gone up through the sleeve, scarcely had she peered out of the collar, than a blinding light shone toward her. All at once, she found herself on a marvelously fragrant meadow, from which millions of sparks arose like blinking gems. "We are on the rock candy meadow," said Nutcracker, "but soon we'll pass through that gate." Now, looking up, Marie first noticed the lovely gate just a few steps forward on the meadow. The gate seemed to be made of white, brown, and raisin-colored sprinkled marble, but when Marie drew closer, she saw that the entire mass consisted of baked raisins and sugared almonds. That was why, as Nutcracker assured her, the gate they were passing through was called the Almond and Raisin Gate. Common folk very indecorously nicknamed it the Snack Gate. The common folk are always doing that. Can't have a proper name for anything. You need to have a local approximation. In a gallery of this gateway, obviously made of barley sugar, barley sugar? 6 monkeys in red jerkins were playing the most beautiful Turkish military music. As a result, Marie scarcely noticed that she was progressing farther and farther on multicolored tiles, which, however, were nothing but nicely filled lozenges. Soon, the travelers were surrounded by the sweetest perfumes, which poured out of a wondrous grove that opened on both sides. In the dark foliage, the interior glowed and gleamed so brightly that you could see gold and silver fruits hanging on gaudy branches. Stems and stalks had decorated themselves with ribbons and bouquets like merry marital couples with cheerful wedding guests. And when the orange scents billowed like zephyrs, within the twigs and leaves all hummed, and the tinsel flapped and fluttered so thoroughly that it all sounded like jubilant music, which had to accompany the sparkling lights, the hopping, and the dancing. Yeah, Candyland this is all very evocative of Candyland, which I think is probably the reverse. I'm rather sure that the classic board game was made with this in mind instead. I mean, there's just the general idea of children living in a land of candy that is kind of universal, but I've got a hunch that the board game took a lot of inspiration from this rather than any sort of reverse. "Ah, how beautiful it all is!" cried Marie, blissful and enraptured. "We are in Christmas Forest, my dear demoiselle," said Nutcracker. "Ah," Marie continued, "if only I could spend a little time here. Oh, it's far too beautiful." Nutcracker clapped his little hands, and along came a few small shepherds and shepherdesses, hunters and huntswomen, who were so white and tender that you could have believed them to be pure sugar, that Marie had not yet noticed, even though they had been strolling in the woods. They brought over a favorite gold armchair and placed a white cushion of licorice upon it. White licorice? Huh. And very courteously invited Marie to settle down. No sooner had she done so than shepherds and shepherdesses came and danced a very pretty ballet, whereby the hunters blew their instruments quite decently. But then they all vanished in the bushes. "Forgive me," said Nutcracker, "forgive me, dearest Demoiselle Stahlbaum, for doing such a miserable dance. You see, the dancers all came from our marionette ballet, which is controlled by wires, and which can only do the same things over and over again. There are also good reasons why the hunters were so drowsy and feeble in their blowing. The sugar basket does hang at nose level on the Christmas tree, but it's still too high. Well, why don't we stroll a bit more?" "Ah, everything was very lovely, and I really liked it," said Marie, standing up and following Nutcracker. They walked along a murmuring, sweetly whispering brook, which seemed to be filling the forest with all of its marvelous scents. "This is Orange Brook," said Nutcracker when asked. "It has a lovely fragrance, but it doesn't equal in size or in beauty the Lemonade River, which likewise empties into Lake Almond Milk." And indeed, Marie soon heard a louder plashing and splashing, and she spotted the broad Lemonade River. In proud cream-colored waves it rippled away amid green, glowing, garnet-shining shrubs, and an exceeding freshness, cooling her breast and her heart, surged up from the stunning water. Not too far from there, the water of a dark yellow creek was being arduously dragged away, spreading utterly sweet perfumes. Yes, we'll all let that one just wash away with the tide. On the shore, all kinds of very lovely little children sat angling small, thick fish and consuming them right away. Upon coming closer, Marie noticed that these fish looked like hazelnuts. In the distance, a very pretty hamlet lay on the creek. Houses, church, parsonage, barns, they were all dark brown, but decorated with gold roofs. Furthermore, countless walls were painted so colorfully as if lemon peels and almond kernels were pasted on them. "That's Gingerbread Home," said Nutcracker. "It lies on Honey River, and it's inhabited by very lovely people. But they're mostly grouchy because they suffer terribly from toothaches. And that's why they're not going inside. We're not going inside. At that moment, Marie noticed a pretty little townlet consisting of colorful, transparent cottages. Nutcracker headed straight in that direction, and now Marie heard a wild, joyful uproar. She also saw 1,000 sweet little people examining and starting to unpack many crammed wagons standing in the marketplace. But what they produced was gaudy, colored paper and bars of chocolate. "We're in Bonbonville," said Nutcracker. "A shipment has just arrived from Paperland and from Chocolate King. A short while ago, the poor Bonbonvillers were harshly threatened by Mosquito Admiral's navy. That's why they've covered their homes with the gifts of Paperland, and why they're not constructing proficient works sent them by Chocolate King. However, dearest Demoiselle Stolbom, we don't plan to visit every last townlet and hamlet of this land. To the capital! To the capital!" Nutcracker rushed forward, and Marie, filled with curiosity, brought up the rear. It wasn't long before the fragrance of roses wafted up, and everything was surrounded by a gentle, floating shimmer of roses. Marie perceived that this was the image in a rosy red shining creek which flowed in tiny pink and silver waves, gushing and rushing as if in wondrously beautiful notes and melodies. On this graceful water, which broadened out more and more like a huge lake, marvelous silver-white swans with golden neckbands were swimming and vying with one another in singing the loveliest songs. Tiny diamond fish emerged and submerged, as if dancing a merry dance on the flood of roses. "Ah!" cried Marie enthusiastically. "Ah! This is the lake that Godfather Drosselmeyer wanted to make for me, truly. And I myself am the girl who will caress the dear little swans." Nutcracker smirked more scornfully than Marie had ever noticed on him. Then he said, "That's something that Uncle will never be able to do. You will manage to do so yourself, dear Demoiselle Stolbom. But let's not ponder it too deeply. Instead, let's cross the Lake of Roses and head for the capital." That's the end of that chapter. And Nutcracker's got a little bit of sass there. His uncle that is not so helpful after all has got a little bit of a scorn there. Ooh, ooh. So there's a lot of little bits of incongruencies throughout that whole sequence of the Kingdom of Dolls with Candyland and all. The white licorice, the off-color lemonade river, the things that are not quite right. Fish that are hazelnuts. It's like, It's understandable to have things that are substituted for candies and sweets, but they're not quite right, even so. Which sort of lends itself to the imaginations of children, where things aren't always exactly as they seem. They don't know better. That's part of the wonder of it all. You get strangely colored items and bits and bobs that really there's absolutely no way they can actually exist. But in the minds of children, everything is fair game. Alright, let's see. How much do we have left? About eight or 9 pages. That's not too bad. Alright, let's continue on now with the next chapter, The Capital. Nutcracker clapped his tiny hands again, and the Lake of Roses started rushing more and more strongly, the waves splashing higher and higher. Marie noticed a shell-shaped vehicle coming from far away, and drawn by 2 dolphins covered with golden scales. The vehicle was formed by gaudy, sunny, and sparkling jewels. 12 darling little Moors, wearing caps and loincloths woven out of shiny hummingbird feathers, sprang ashore. They carried first Marie, then Nutcracker, gently gliding over the waves to the vehicle, which then sailed across the lake. Oh, how lovely it was to see Marie in the rolling vehicle, surrounded by the fragrance of roses and flowing around the waves of roses. The two golden dolphins raised their nostrils and spurted the waves of roses, and spurted crystal rays high in the air. And where the arcs fell flickering and twinkling, it sounded like the crooning of two fine and graceful voices. Can you imagine making clothes out of hummingbird feathers? That has got to be the most expensive possible material. So very tiny. That's got to be crazy. Again, imagination of children. But this also strikes me as something that someone has probably tried once upon a time. And it probably was some ridiculous aristocrat who decided, that's the material I want, it must be mine! Yeah, I could see it. I could see it. They were probably French. Marie Antoinette got nothing on this. Yeah, exactly. I bet the French have done this. Same thoughts. Same thoughts. Alright, where were we? Yep, even with the delay, the stream delay, we got this on point. Alright. Who swims in the rosy lake? For goodness sake, midges, no bridges, boom, boom, fish, what a dish! Ha, ha, swans, where are ponds? Swa, swa, goldbird, tra, ra, streams, reams, teams, beams, angels, angels, singing wings! However, the 12 little Moors, who had sprung in back of the chariot, seemed to take the singing of the streams of water amiss, for they shook their parasols so hard that the date leaves they were made of got creased and crumpled. They also stamped their feet to a bizarre beat. Clap and clip and clip and clap and to and fro. Moors dance around, make a sound. Stir, fish, stir, swans, drone, chariot, drone. Clap and clip and clip and clap and to and fro. Moors are such merry people, said Nutcracker, somewhat embarrassed. Goodness, you'll make the entire lake rebellious. And indeed, a confusing uproar of wonderful voices exploded. They seemed to swim in the lake and in the air, but Marie ignored them all. Instead, she peered at the waves of fragrant roses, and each wave smiled back at her smiling girlish face, a graceful and a gracious face. Ah! Cried Marie, joyfully clapping her little hands together. Ah! Just look, dear Herr Drosselmeyer. Princess Pirlipat is down there, smiling at me so wondrously and graciously. Oh, do look, Herr Drosselmeyer! But Nutcracker sighed and almost lamentably, and said, Oh, dearest Demoiselle Snowball, that's not Princess Pirlipat. That's you, and always you yourself. That's always your own gracious face smiling so dearly out of every billow of roses. Marie threw back her head, shut her eyes tight, and was very ashamed. That same instant, she was lifted from the chariot by the 12 Moors and carried ashore. She now found herself in a small grove that was almost lovelier than Christmas forest, since everything in it shone and sparkled. But especially, one could admire the strange fruit that hung from all the trees. Fruit that was not only strangely colored, but also marvelously fragrant. We are in Jelly Grove, said Nutcracker, and there's the capital. What did Marie catch sight of now? How, you children, will I even stop to describe the beauty and splendor of the city that spread out over a rich, flowery pasture before Marie's very eyes? Not only were the walls and towers resplendent in the most fantastic colors, but, in regard to the forms of the houses, there was nothing similar anywhere in the world. For, instead of roofs, the houses had delicately pleated wreaths. The towers were topped with the finest and most colorful foliage that could ever be seen. when they passed through the gates, which looked as if they were built out of macaroons and frosted fruit, silver soldiers presented their rifles, and a mannequin in a brocaded robe threw his arms around Nutcracker and said, "Welcome, dearest prince! Welcome to Jamberg!" Marie was astonished that young Drosselmeyer was addressed as Prince by a noble gentleman. But now she heard so many very fine voices bursting through one another, exulting and laughing for joy, playing and singing, that she couldn't think of anything else. Instead, she asked little Nutcracker just what it all meant. "Oh, dearest Demoiselle Stahlbaum," replied Nutcracker, "it's nothing unusual. Jamberg is a merry, populous city. Every day is like this. But let's keep going, please." No sooner had they walked a few paces than they reached the great marketplace, which offered the most thrilling view. The surrounding houses were shuttered by suites. Gallery was piled on gallery, and at the middle there stood a high, frosted layer cake as the obelisk. All about it, 4 very artful fountains spewed orgeat, lemonade, and other superb sweet drinks. And the basin filled up with cream, which could have been spooned out right away. But lovelier than anyone else were the little people. Thousands of them crowded through, head by head, exulting and laughing and joking and singing. In short, they raised the merry uproar that Marie had already heard far away. There were elegant ladies and gentlemen, Greeks and Armenians, Jews and Tyroleans, officers and soldiers and preachers and shepherds and buffoons. In short, every kind of person to be found in the entire world. In one corner the tumult increased. The crowd streamed apart. Then the Grand Mogul was carried across in a palanquin, escorted by 93 grandees and 700 slaves. That's what I thought. It's used in cocktails. I don't have any in my home bar, but it's one of those things that comes up from time to time. Where was I? But what happened was that in the other corner, the Fish Guild, some 500 head strong, was holding its parade. And it was also dreadful that the Turkish grandee had the idea of riding across the marketplace with 3,000 janissaries, followed by the huge pageant of the opera, The Interrupted Sacrificial Feast. Just as the crowd charged toward the layer cake, singing and beating their drums, "Up, thank the powerful sun!" What pushing and shoving and driving and squealing! Soon there was also a lot of yammering, for a fishman had lopped off a Brahmin's head in the mob, and the Grand Mogul was nearly run over by a buffoon. The racket grew wilder and wilder, and the participants were already starting to lunge into one another and beat one another, when the man in the brocade robe climbed up the layer cake. This was the man who had greeted Nutcracker as prince. Now, after a very dazzling bell was pealed 3 times, he cried aloud 3 times, "Confectioner! Confectioner! Confectioner!" Yeah, most cocktail syrups are best made just on your own. I follow a channel on YouTube that's got a lot of home bar tips and such, and he's constantly making his own simple and various other specialized syrups that are almost always just variations of simple syrup. But all very interesting. You generally use such small amount. Yes, it is how to drink. Are we sharing a brain cell again? Fair. It's good content, though. It's good stuff. Where were we? The tumult promptly faded, and each man tried to help himself as best he could. After the entanglements were untangled, the filthy Grand Mogul was cleaned and brushed, and the Brahmin's head was put back on again. And now the merry clamor was resumed. "What's all this about the confectioner, my good Herr Drosselmeyer?" asked Marie. My dearest Demoiselle Stallbaum, replied Nutcracker, confectioner is our name for an unknown but very ghastly power that we believe can do whatever we like to a human being. It is the doom hanging over this small, cheerful nation, and this little nation is so frightened that the mere mention of its name can silence the loudest tumult, as was just proved by the mayor. Each man then stops thinking about earthly matters, about pokes in the ribs and bumps in the head. Instead, he draws into himself and says, "What is man, and what can become of him?" Marie couldn't help crying out in loud admiration, nay, supreme amazement. She was suddenly standing in front of a rose-red, brightly shimmering castle with 100 airy turrets. But now and again, rich bouquets of violets, narcissi, tulips, and gillyflowers were scattered on the walls, and the dark, burning colors simply dazzled as they heightened the rosy tint against the white ground. The vast dome of the central building, as well as the pyramid-shaped roofs of the turrets, were strewn with 1,000 gold and silver twinkling stars. "Now we are outside the Marzipan Castle," said Nutcracker. Marie was totally absorbed in viewing the enchanted palace, but it did not escape her that the roof of one huge tower was completely missing. Small mannequins perching on a scaffold of cinnamon sticks appeared intent on restoring the rooftop. Before managing to ask Nutcracker about it, he continued, "A short while ago, this beautiful castle was threatened with destruction, if not total devastation. Sweet Tooth the Giant came along, quickly bit off that roof, and was already gnawing on the huge dome. However, the Jamburgers brought him an entire city district, plus a considerable section, and a confect grove as a tribute, which he fed on and then went his way." Here we are again with appeasement. At that same moment, a very gentle and pleasant music could be heard. The gates of the castle opened up, and 12 little page boys came out, holding clove stems like torches in their little hands. A page's head consisted of a pearl, his body of rubies and emeralds, and they walked on little feet beautifully worked in pure gold. They were followed by 4 ladies, almost as big as Marie's Quartian, but so elegantly shining and splendid that Marie could not mistake the born princesses in them for even an instant. She embraced Nutcracker tenderly and exclaimed with mournful joy, "Oh, my prince, my dearest prince, oh, my brother!" Nutcracker seemed deeply moved. He wiped the dense tears from his eyes and took hold of Marie's hand, and spoke grandiloquently. "This is Demoiselle Stallbaum, the daughter of a very highly appreciated medical counselor and the savior of my life. If she hadn't hurled the slipper at the right time, if she hadn't gotten me the sword of the retired lieutenant, then I'd be lying in the grave, all chewed up by that accursed Mouse King." "Oh, that Demoiselle Stallbaum? Does she equal Perlipot in beauty, kindness, and virtue, even though she is a born princess? No, I tell you, no!" And all the ladies cried, "No!" And they hugged Marie and they sobbed, "Oh, you savior of all the beloved princely brother, excellent Demoiselle Stallbaum." Now, the ladies escorted Marie and Nutcracker into the interior of the castle, a vast space whose walls consisted of colorfully sparkling crystals. But what Marie liked best of all were the darling little chairs, tables, dressers, secretaries which stood around. They were made of cedar and Brazil wood, with golden blossoms scattered upon them. The princesses urged Marie and Nutcracker to have a seat, and they themselves would prepare a meal. They pulled out a lot of little pots and bowls made of the finest Japanese porcelain, and knives and spoons and forks and grates and casseroles, and other kitchen appliances of gold and silver. Then they brought the loveliest fruits and sweets, such as Marie had never seen before. And then they tenderly squeezed the fruits with their tiny white hands, pounded the spices and grated the sugar almonds. In short, they knew their way around a kitchen. And the princesses could see that they were preparing a delicious meal, while vividly feeling that they likewise understood such things. Marie secretly desired that she could be actively present at the activities of the princesses. As if she had read his mind, Nutcracker's most beautiful sister handed Marie a small gold mortar, saying, "Oh, sweet friend, dearest saviour of my brother, grind me a wee bit of this from this rock candy." Marie pounded away so cheerfully that the mortar resounded, graceful and charming, like a lovely tune. Nutcracker started telling his tale, indeed, sprawling and rambling. He told about the gruesome battle between his army and Mouse King's army, about his losing due to the cowardice of his troops. Nutcracker also told about how the repulsive Mouse King wanted to chew him to bits, and Marie therefore had to sacrifice a few of the subjects in her service. During this narrative, Marie felt as if her words, nay, her pencil strokes, were moving farther away, growing hazier and hazier. Soon, rising like flimsy clouds of mist, Marie watched the silvery gauzes in which the princesses, the page boys, and Nutcracker swam. They could hear a bizarre singing and whirring and whizzing, which vanished in the distance. And now, Marie wanted to ascend as if surging on billows, higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. That is the end of this chapter, and it seems very likely that Marie is waking up. Such it is that all dreams must end. But, so this is a fun little segue. This whole segment that we've started, like after the fall of the Mouse King, this doesn't really follow traditional narrative flow. Like, we've got the ups and downs and resolutions and peaks and climaxes and falling offs, but the real action points happened around the halfway mark, and then sort of trailed off, and we're in a very long, lingering exploration of imagination rather than any sort of narrative tension, which is nice. It's a good, like, children's story, but you can sort of tell that this was originally meant as a children's story, probably told to children at the bedside more than anything else, and not really a novel published in order to be a literary work. And that is fine. That is totally fine. It's just a nice little observation. Yeah, definitely a reasonable framework. You don't need the continual, like, the continual building of tension and then the final explosive climax. You don't need the ups, downs, peaks, and troughs, because it is meant for children. They don't know what is to be expected of things, and they don't necessarily need that biting tension for each. If you plan this as, like, each chapter being a parent telling their children a bedtime story, and that chapter is that night's reading, it fits very well, because it doesn't need all of that. You just need to distract them a little bit until they fall asleep. And that fits very perfectly. Alright, we have one chapter left. Normally I would take a quick break before we get to the end, because we are right around the end of or right around the hour mark. But let's power through here, get through this last chapter, and then we'll take a break and come back and just chat for a little bit. We'll probably end early. I'd rather not pull out some other short stories tonight. We'll stay on focus, on task, on this story in particular. But after we finish the story, we'll have some time to just hang out and chat. So, we come now to the last chapter, the conclusion. Puff resounded. Marie plunged down from an immeasurable height. Now that was a jolt. She opened her eyes and found herself lying in her little bed. It was broad daylight, and her mother stood in front of her saying, "How can anyone sleep so long? Breakfast has been ready for quite a while." Highly esteemed audience, you do notice that Marie, utterly dazed by all the wonders she had seen, had finally dozed off in the vast hall of Marzipan Castle. Next, she had been carried home and put to bed by the Moors or the pages or even the princesses themselves. "Oh, mother, dear mother, where did the young Herr Drosselmeyer take me to last night? And what gorgeous things did I see?" Now, Marie told me everything almost as precisely as I just did, and Mother gaped at her in amazement. When Marie was finished, Father said, "You've had a very long and very lovely dream, dear Marie, but now you've simply got to dismiss all such thoughts from your mind." However, Marie obstinately insisted that she hadn't been dreaming, that she had really seen all those things. Mother then led her to the glass cabinet, took out Nutcracker from his usual place on the third shelf, and said, "You silly girl, how can you truly believe that this wooden Nuremberg doll can have life and motion?" "But dear Mother," Marie broke in, "I do know that little Nutcracker is young Herr Drosselmeyer's nephew from Nuremberg." Both parents burst into noisy laughter. "Ah," Marie went on almost cheerfully, "now you're actually making fun of my Nutcracker. Father dear, even though he spoke so highly of you, for when we arrived at Marsban Castle and Nutcracker introduced me to his sisters, the princesses, he said that you were a very respectable medical counselor." This time, the laughter, which now emerged from Louise and even Fritz, was all the more vociferous. So Marie ran into the next room, quickly reached into her small casket, produced the 7 crowns of Mouse King, and handed them to her mother, saying, "Just look, Mother dear. These are Mouse King's 7 crowns, which young Herr Drosselmeyer gave me last night as a sign of his victory." The astonished mother viewed the tiny crowns. They were worked so cleanly from a totally unfamiliar but intensely sparkling metal that they couldn't have been wrought by human hands. Nor could the medical counselor see his fill of the little crowns. Both father and mother deeply urged Marie to reveal where she had obtained the crowns, but she could only stick to what she had said. When her father started treating her severely, even scolding her and calling her a little liar, Marie burst into tears and lamented, "Oh, poor child that I am, poor child! What should I say now?" At that moment, the door flew open. The Supreme Court counselor came in and exclaimed, "What's this? What's this? My dear little child weeping and sobbing. What's this? What's this?" The medical counselor informed him about everything that had happened, and he showed him the little crowns. But no sooner had he seen the crowns than he laughed and said, "Empty twaddle, empty twaddle. Why, those are the little crowns I wore on my watch chain years ago. I gave them to little Marie on her 2nd birthday. Have you all forgotten?" And neither the medical counselor nor his wife could remember. But when Marie saw the faces of her parents had grown friendly again, she sprang upon Godfather Drosselmeyer and exclaimed, "Ah, you know everything, Godfather. Just tell them that my Nutcracker is your nephew, the young Herr Drosselmeyer from Nuremberg, and that he gave me the crowns." But the Supreme Court counselor scowled and muttered, "Silly madness twaddle." Thereupon the medical counselor took little Marie before him and spoke very earnestly. "Listen, Marie, forget about your antics and your fantasies. If you ever repeat that the deformed and simple-minded Nutcracker is the nephew of Herr Supreme Counselor, I'll hurl all your dolls out the window. Not only Nutcracker, but all your others, including Mamselle Clotchen." Now, poor Marie could no longer talk about what her mind was filled with, for you can certainly imagine that Marie's lovely and splendid experiences were unforgettable. Even my highly esteemed reader or listener, Fritz, even her comrade Fritz Stahlbaum, turned his back on his sister when she tried to tell him about the miraculous realms where she was so happy. At times, supposedly, he had even muttered between his teeth, "Silly goose." Still, I can't believe he really said that, given his tried and tested disposition. This much, however, is certain. Since Fritz no longer believed what Marie told him, he virtually apologized to his hussars in public review, apologized for the injustice he had made them suffer. Instead of the lost ensigns, far higher and lovelier bushes of goose quills decorated them, and again permitted them to blast the hussar march. Well, we know best about the courage of the hussars, when they got spots from their ugly dumplings on their red jerkins. Though Marie was not allowed to talk about her adventures, the images of that wondrous fairyland hovered about her in sweetly rushing billows and gracious, charming sounds. She looked at everything once more, focusing sharply, and so, in lieu of playing as usual, she sat there, quiet and rigid and deeply self-absorbed. That is why everyone scolded her for being a little dreamer. Now, one day,
the Supreme Court counselor was repairing a clock in the medical counselor's home. Marie was sitting by the glass cabinet, deep in her dreams, and peering at Nutcracker. All at once, she blurted out, "Ah, dear Herr Drosselmeyer, if you were truly alive, I wouldn't treat you like Princess Pirlipat, scorning you because, for my sake, you stopped being a handsome young man." At that moment, the Supreme Court counselor yelled, "Hey, empty twaddle!" At that instant, there was a whack and a boom. Then Marie fainted and sank from her chair. When she awoke, her mother was busily attending to her and said, "How could you fall from the chair? Such a big girl! The nephew of the Supreme Court counselor has just arrived from Nuremberg. Be a good girl." Marie looked up. The Supreme Court counselor had put his glass periwig back on, slipped into his yellow jacket, and smiled in great satisfaction. His hand clutched a small but very well-built young man, while his little face had a peaches and cream complexion. He wore a splendid red coat with a gilt lining, white silk shoes and stockings, and a darling bouquet in his jabot. He was also nicely groomed and powdered, and a wonderful queue hung down his back. The little sword on his side glittered as if thoroughly encrusted with jewels, and the cap he held under his arm seemed woven out of silk flocks. The young man's pleasant habits were demonstrated immediately by the many gorgeous toys he had brought for Marie. He also offered her the most delectable marzipan, and the same figurines that Mouse King had chewed up, whereby the young man had also given Fritz a magnificent saber. During the meal, the well-behaved young man cracked nuts for the entire company. Not even the hardest shells could resist him. With his right hand, he inserted the nuts into his mouth, and with his left hand, he pulled his cue. Crack! The nut fell into pieces. Marie had turned bright red upon seeing the well-behaved young man, and she turned even redder after the meal when young Drosselmeyer invited her to join him at the glass cabinet in the living room. "Playing nicely with one another, children," the Supreme Court counselor exclaimed. "I don't mind playing now that all my clocks run correctly." But no sooner was young Drosselmeyer alone with Marie than he knelt down on one knee and said, "Oh, my highly esteemed Demoiselle Stahlbaum, see at your feet your happy Drosselmeyer, whose life you saved on this very spot. You were kind enough to state that if I grew ugly for your sake, you would not scorn me like that wretched Princess Pirlipat. I promptly stopped being a despicable Nutcracker, and I regained my earlier, not unpleasant looks. Oh, highly esteemed demoiselle, delight me with your worthy hand, share crown and kingdom with me, rule from Marzipan Castle with me, for I am now king there." Marie lifted up the youth and said quietly, "Dear Herr Drosselmeyer, you are a kind and gentle person, and since you also rule a graceful land with very cheerful and attractive people, I will accept you as my fiancée." Marie hereby became Drosselmeyer's fiancée. A year later, we are told, he called for her in a golden carriage drawn by silver horses. 22,000 of the most brilliant figurines danced amid their adornments of pearls and diamonds. Marie, supposedly, is still queen of a land where you can see sparkling Christmas forests everywhere, as well as translucent marzipan castles. In short, the most splendid and wondrous things, if you only have the right eyes to see them with. And that was the tale of Nutcracker and Mouse King. All right, so we've got through the story and that little bit of a twist at the end where the imagination may be a little more real than you might imagine. I do have to look now because this version of the book that I have, just a PDF I found, also has the Dumas version following. Will not be reading it, but I'm interested to see if there's more to it or if it's a fair bit longer. it seems like Dumas may have been a little bit wordier. This is going a little bit longer on. Oh yeah, there's extra chapters and such in here. Okay, yeah, that carries on through. Yeah, so the Dumas retold this with a little bit more panache, shall we say, which is very on brand for Dumas. All right. Yeah, I know, right? All right, let's go ahead and take a few minutes. We'll be back just a little bit and top up the drink, stretch the legs, and we'll just have a little bit of a fireside chat when we get back. All right, just a few minutes now. All right, we are back. Well, I don't know about you guys, but it is definitely feeling like the season around here. I've got Christmas cards made up and ready to go out. I've got the weather is very seasonal right now. I think it just dipped below zero, and we've got quite a lot of snow. Unfortunately, I think most of the snow is going to be melting off by the holidays. But for now, we can make do. Yeah, where the very cold is, while a challenge, it does get you in the mindset. And as a little bit of an extra blessing, my pipes haven't frozen yet, which they seem to do every year. So far, so good. We'll do what we can to keep things going in the meantime. Something about the insulation and such is not... Yeah. Yeah, I don't really get too much into the season. So I think trying to... I think trying to share it a little bit more is contagious. It takes a bit of a conscious effort to get into the season. We, as adults, we sort of have to make the magic happen ourselves. So having things to add motivation to get into the spirit is helpful to sort of get that moving and grooving and knock the rust off the wheels there. So I may deserve some blame there. But this is out of character for me as well. So I am trying to make sure that we can keep in the spirit properly. Yeah, there we go. I will say, I am very happy with how this past year has gone. We started back in January, if you believe it or not. I think it was the end of January when we debuted. And barring a few family emergencies, we've stuck to our schedule remarkably faithfully. To be fair, it is a rather easy schedule to keep, just 2-hour streams at a time and 4 a week. But I'm happy with how we've done so far with our consistency. It is one thing that I've noticed that a lot of streamers, it has been almost a year. We're coming up on a little less than a month or a little bit more than a month until our anniversary. So it's crazy how time flies. I was looking, I think if I look now and see how many videos we've got on the channel, it's actually kind of impressive. Let's see, actually, now that let's see. The trick is always where to find the actual number. Yeah, I think consistency is the biggest hurdle for many and most. Wow, we've got 173 videos. That is pretty impressive, honestly. For a year, and for each of them representing a stream, no AI bullshittery of spinning up videos out of thin air. I'm alright with that. 173 in a little less than a year is a respectable target. But yes, you're absolutely right. Consistency is one of the biggest challenges for people that are getting off the ground. We have a small community here, a couple regulars. Akamos is always here, and I'm happy with that. More people are always welcome, and people come and go. But I'll be here reading, and because I enjoy what we're doing. As we started out, I do this to increase my own reading. I do a lot of reading on my own, and I figured, why not share it? And I think we're all in a similar vein here. This is a fun little way to build some community around things and keep ourselves honest. So, here's to finishing out the year strong and to another year. And yes, the footnotes are appreciated. I often can't look things up on the fly as we're reading. The great failing of live narration. So having some fact-checking on the side is helpful.
And having some yapping partners definitely also helps. Get a little bit of sounding board off and spark off conversations. I can talk into the void with the best of them, but it helps to have a little bit of a conversation partner. And yeah, you know what? We do have some VOD folks. I've seen most of our videos tend to get, most of our streams tend to get in like the 10 to 20 views range, and most of our streams themselves only get between like 3 and 5 views any given day. So we do have a VOD gang around here. So we're looking out for you. We got you. All right. So we promised some yap. Well, I guess we've been yapping since we got back. Such as it is. So yeah, we've had a good year. We're getting into the holiday spirit, having the ideas floating around. Went off to the pharmacy and printed off some pictures the other day. Got a new framed one up over top the mantle for the fireplace. Had an empty space. Like, all right, let's get something up there. So been wildly productive lately. It's unusual, but I'm definitely, as much as I'm enjoying the holiday season, I'm looking forward to after the holidays when we can take the tree down and get back to a little bit of normalcy. I haven't been able to run Roomba nearly as much as I should, because it's just not worth fighting, picking things up and moving things around when there's holiday decorations everywhere. So there is much more cat fluff around the house than I would typically allow. It is one of the problem of having very floofy cats around the house. They drop fur everywhere, especially after a brushing. I think I took a comb to get out any knots and tangles out of Simba's coat the other day, and I swear I had a full fist floof of fur. And it stands out. White fur, you cannot hide it. It doesn't matter what color your shirt or carpet or anything is, it's gonna stand out. That, or it may just be that I don't wear white all that often. But there is that. But look at some of my shirts, and there are lots of cat hair. Not just a couple hairs. No. Entire bundles of fluff and fuzz. Dust bunnies ain't got nothing on me. That is true. The floaty wispy fur there's definitely like a couple different kinds of fluff and fuzz. There's the wispy floaty stuff that the long-haired cats tend to get into, and that you cannot get rid of. It is powerful. It will tangle up the vacuum. It will wire around the brushes of your broom. It'll do anything. And then there's the shorter hair that tends to just build up in the cat beds and things like that for the more common short-haired cats. Up until last year, I had both around, so that was a fun intermingling of fluff and fuzz. Now we've just got 2 of the long hair fluff monsters, and it is omnipresent. Who needs tinsel when you've got white cat hair decking the halls and everywhere? So, do we have any plans for the holidays itself? Personally, I've got a work get-together thing, celebration for the holidays and in general,
coming up this coming Tuesday. It's going to be during the day. They're planning a whole slew of things. Ugly sweater contest, reindeer games, a dessert cook-off, and whatnot. I'll probably just be spectating. I don't think I have any ugly sweaters around. But it is about that time where we start to leak into real life, where there's in-person events going on and off and about. You know what? There's a special... Voids are great. I know they're adopted less, and they're returned more often, but voids are great, and they deserve all of the snuggles. A friend of mine's got a void tripod, and she is the bestest. But really, all cats are awesome. But we won't say that directly to their faces. Alright, so, what are we doing next? We've got, I think, let me look ahead. We've got, I just minimized everything, don't want to do that. Damn it, Windows. Alright. We've got Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and one more Tuesday. The Tuesday the 23rd is booked. We've got that one planned out. So we have 4 nights left. Hello, Simba. Yes. Oh boy. So let's see if we can find something to take us through the next few days. I've got there's a large number of just like short story collections, but we're falling into the challenges that we've discovered through finding wildly specific reading selections for a month, where there's really only so much content. We've got a lot of short stories, plays, and things, but the broader scope, it's very surprising. See, there's stories and legends, and story of a stuffed... Oh, no, that's all an audiobook already. No, I don't need an audiobook. I'm the audiobook. Looking through this, the problem with Gutenberg, I love Gutenberg, but the problem when you're searching for, like, say, Christmas things, about half of the selections are going to be like academic dissertations on things, and it's like, I don't need to read a thesis, I need content. Let's see. And actually, as I'm thinking about it, there's not a whole, like, I see a lot of things that have, like, Christmas episodes, like series of books that have a few chapters that are dedicated to the season, and other sort of media that have, like, okay, it's Christmas time, here's a Christmas episode, here's a mini-series for the holidays, but not really much that is dedicated solely to it, which I guess it makes sense. There's only so much holiday time to go around, but it would make things, it would make my life easier if there was a little bit more selection of dedicated literature selections. What's this? Yuletide in many lands? Cultural and historical account. No, that's alright. That sounds like we'd be getting into another Walden situation. Technically, yes. Yeah. We already kind of stretched things when we went to Peace on Earth, Goodwill to Dogs. That was definitely a Christmas story, but that was not really what we would find. Oh, there's something that says, I saw satirical in the synopsis. What do we got here? Oh, short stories and essays. I mean, that could be alright. This is A Christmas Garland by Sir Max Beerbohm. That could be fun. Maybe a day. Showcasing Beerbohm's keen observation of human nature and societal norms surrounding the festive season. Okay, that's a little hoity-toity, but it is what it is. We'll download this one just in case. I'll review it and see if it's going to be up to snuff. Then, let's see. We've got The Night Before Christmas prepped. We already read Christmas Carol. We already read Gift of the Magi. Let's see. Life and Adventure of Santa Claus we hit. We could go back to Baum. There's A Kidnapped Santa Claus. That could be fun. A good old classic savings Christmas story. But I'd rather we not hit too much Baum. Okay, we'll download this one too, just in case. Let's see. Yeah. The Battle of Life, another Dickens. Yeah, that's alright. This is just poems. That could be fine. In the Yule Long Glow, Book 4, which kind of indicates that there should be at least 3 others. Let me see this. Yes, there are, in fact. Why is Book 4 downloaded twice as often as Book 1? That is ever so slightly worrying. Why not? Maybe we'll do this one. Harrison S. Morris, a collection of short stories from around the world. That could be good. We'll see. Alright, so we've got some ideas. Need to fill the time a little bit. It's not really a filler episode, but it might be a filler episode. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So, we'll see where this next week will take us. We're very quickly approaching the holidays itself. Actually, let me get a good look at a calendar because we are kind of in the thick of the winter holiday season. We've got, yep, so, let's see. 2025. Yep, we are actually, does Hanukkah kick off tonight? I think that's right. And that'll run through the 22nd. And then we'll get into Christmas, and then Kwanzaa kicks off on the 26th, so yeah, we're right in the thick of things. That is the nice part of this time of year. There's something going on for people just about everywhere. And it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's a good reminder at the end of the year that there's some things to tidy up, clean up our affairs, and get them ready for the next year. That is true. I hadn't thought of that. I'd been searching for just Christmas books, but Hanukkah would be every bit as valid. Let me see about reading lists here. The question is always how we're going to spell Hanukkah. Whether it be the right way with the C, or just with the H. It's hard telling. And actually, I don't know if there's a reading list of either. So, let's just do a good old search. There is exactly one result for the story of Hanukkah. Okay, yeah, thanks Gutenberg. Okay, let's broaden the search a little bit. Let's see. Do we have anything under J? Yeah, Judaism is in here. But that is probably going to lead us into probably a lot more academic works. And not really much on the holiday. Yeah. No, this is all academic. I'm not feeling that's gonna do us be a good selection. No. I would just need to go to good old Google and see what we can find. Because yeah, that would be a very good idea. Because as we were talking about, there's more than just Christmas to the season. I'm very much in the Happy Holidays camp. I'll wish you a Merry Christmas, but there's a lot of people around that have a lot of different ideas. So, Happy Holidays all the way. I'll tell you Merry Christmas on Christmas. That's fair. You know what? We might just be reading from some webpage stories and things and see what we go through there. So, I'll plan around and we'll see what we can do. Maybe we'll do Hanukkah on Tuesday. Actually, when is the last day of Hanukkah? It goes to the 22nd? Yeah, maybe next weekend we'll do some Hanukkah things. It's what, 8 days through? Yeah. We've got options. We'll keep that door open. We don't want to shut off any direction that we could make some content for. Yeah, that's right. Like, if I'm initiating Happy Holidays, if someone gives me one, I will respond in kind, because I'm not about to kick up a fuss. Now, where I'm at, it's a lot of Merry Christmases, but that is just the nature of being kind of in the sticks. But you deal with the cards you're given. And yes, some holidays, like all holidays, are worth observing and respecting. You don't need to take a big production about it, and just because you're not celebrating any specific holiday doesn't mean that other people aren't. So, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas, whatever floats your boat. The point of it all is to celebrate each other, celebrate the time that we've had on this planet, and celebrate the coming year. Get through the long cold of winter and into the coming spring. So, that's my take on it anyway. The old neo-modernist take of Bill and Ted: be excellent to each other. That's what we should all strive for. Just be excellent to each other. Yes, happy culturally appropriate winter solstice celebration. In the schmarmiest way you can possibly push it. Because if you're not embarrassing your listener, are you really celebrating the holiday properly? I think not.
All right, guys. We've had a bit of back and forth tonight. We're edging awfully close to just into utter nonsense as we go back and forth over treading the same paths. So, let's go ahead and call it a little bit of an early night. Tonight we finished up our reading of Nutcracker and Mouse King, the classic holiday story, and the inspiration that spawned many, many adaptations, different sources, different envisionments and imaginations, and one of the most popular and well-known ballets in existence. And to see it in, not quite the original, because this was a translated version, but a translation of the original, because my German is not quite up to snuff to be able to read the original. But anyway, to see it as it was intended and originally put forth, as a sort of fireside story to children. I loved how it was constantly calling back to the audience and even expecting potential names. It was very German-coded, and regularly calling back to a Fritz in the audience, not to be confused with the Fritz in the story. It was all a very personal story, very down-to-earth, very comfortable. I love that. I wish we could find more stories that were as homey feeling as this. But as we go through, I'm sure we will. We've got a long time ahead of us. We've had a long time before us. And there's no reason for us to even slow down. So, with that, let's go ahead and bundle up for the night. It's getting damn cold around here. So, I'm off to grab a stiffer drink, turn on the fireplace, and settle in for the night. I hope everyone else finds their own bit of comfort and has a wonderful evening. We'll be back on Tuesday with our next reading, to be determined. As always, I am rather late to decide on these things. And we'll find some other way to ring in this holiday season as we approach the holidays themselves. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, merry and bright. Have a wonderful night, and good night, everyone.